Warrior monsters have the longest and most storied history amongst all Yu-Gi-Oh monster types. So today, we're going to be going over the greatest warriors of all time, and not just the strictly most powerful cards like Rhongomyniad or Zexal, who were instant wins but hard to summon and rarely actually saw the light of day before being forbidden. This video's about the truly great warriors that made massive impacts on the game due to both their power and prominence. Kicking us off at number 10, we have every Yu-Gi Boomer's favorite old school warrior boss monster, Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning, or just BLS for short. While this card hardly needs an introduction, as a refresher, you can special summon BLS by banishing a light and dark monster from your grave. Once BLS hits the field, you can pick between two effects once per turn. The first lets you banish any face-up monster, but makes it so BLS can't attack in that same turn. The second lets you attack again if BLS destroys a monster. While the first effect is obviously good, the second is also a pretty big deal, as BLS has a whopping 3000 attack, making this card represent a ton of damage. While not that powerful today compared to modern OTK tools, representing up to 6000 damage usually meant BLS was a game ender more often than not. And if we're just counting impact alone on both the game and in the hearts and minds of players, BLS is too big to be ignored. This monster defined the early years of Yu-Gi-Oh! More than any other boss monster, especially once its partner in crime, Chaos Emperor Dragon Envoy the N, ate a well-deserved banning. BLS is currently known for being format dominated in older eras that players still revisit, like GOAT format, but was still relevant even into the early 2010s after it served a 6-year sentence on the Forbidden list, and went right back to winning major tournaments and new Chaos decks after its release from the Forbidden list. Powerful banishing removal is a solid effect even to this day, and nothing really put out damage like BLS did for well over a decade into Yu-Gi-Oh's history. BLS's only real issue is that it's a completely reactive card, where its power is only on full display when your opponent has monsters on board for it to flex its effects against, either to remove them or hit over them. This has made the modern era of board building, proactive interaction, leave BLS behind on a pure power level basis. But as a singular, dominant card before the days of archetype-centric combos taking over, BLS stands out amongst nearly every other boss monster and warrior for its impact and near decade of longevity. And jumping ahead some years, up next on this list at number 9 is Nekroz of Brionac. This card is more or less a stand-in for the entire Nekroz archetype, which has multiple warriors in it. But Brionac is the glue that kept the entire deck functional with its revolutionary utility as a ritual monster, working like a searcher spell for the archetype with its hand effect to discard itself and add any other Nekroz monster from deck to hand. Before Nekroz, ritual monsters were rarely ever meta-defining, and largely due to their inconsistency from needing a handful of specific cards to even function, and being extremely costly when you do summon them with the cards that they had. Nekroz shattered those weaknesses by being wildly consistent, in no small part thanks to Brionac and generic ritual support that searched it. This meant that the Brionac could grab your Unicorn or Colossalus, either of which could lock your opponent out of play in the game. Unicorn with its own effect, Colossalus for being the right start line and tribute for a Jin releaser rituals. You can annihilate your opponent's board, hand, and graveyard with Nekroz of Trishula, or find the Shirit to fulfill any ritual requirements. Nekroz was one of the most powerful decks in history, earning the vaunted Tier 0 status. And even after some hits to the deck reduced it from that level of dominance, it still remained a top deck for some time afterwards. Brionac had by far the best utility effect of the Nekroz, as it stitched together your combos, and if you needed any of the other effects, it could just search for them. Ritual archetypes ever since have been, in one way or another, following in Nekroz's footsteps by circumventing their summoning restrictions, or need to search so many pieces in the exact same way Nekroz originally did thanks to Brionac. And on top of all of this, the card absolutely annihilated modern board building combo decks that spammed out powerful extra deck monsters with its double spin effect when you summoned it. Powerful, dominant, and a trendsetter for an entire summoning mechanic. Is it any surprise that Nekroz of Brionac is one of the greatest warrior monsters ever? And tagging out at number 8 on this list, we have Sky Striker Ace Raye. Sky Striker is one of the most unique and beloved archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh's history thanks to its control-heavy playstyle that focuses entirely on spamming powerful spells, like Sky Striker Mobilize Engage as a powerful draw spell and searcher, or various interaction tools like Afterburners and Widow Anchor, leveraging and recurring them slowly to out-resource your opponent and win over several turns rather than comboing off an OTK. But the spells aren't the only thing that matters for this deck, as the beating heart of the entire engine is Raye. She has a fairly straightforward effect. Reviving herself from the graveyard as something removes your Sky Striker Link monster from the field, and having a quick effect to link off into those same Link monsters. With how Sky Striker functions, Raye is the main card you use to make the various Link monsters, and those monsters are both how you search the spells you need with Hayate and Shizuku, or recur them for more value with Kagari. Raye makes it so that you can use these in the first place, double up on their effects on your opponent's turn with many of them, and punishes your opponent for disrupting them by constantly recurring and tagging back to make sure the spells keep flowing. And while most people might jump to the various Tier 0 decks in Yu-Gi-Oh's history when they think of the best archetypes ever, Sky Striker might be low-key the most successful deck ever. Even if you don't count decks that were just splashing a small Sky Striker package with cards like Engage, Kagari, and Hornet Drones, and excluding Raye, true Sky Striker decks that actually featured Raye have amassed a whopping 13 YCS winning performances, more than any other deck still to this day. Few, if any, archetypes have had as big of an impact on Yu-Gi-Oh! As Sky Striker. And Sky Striker is nothing without Sky Striker Ace Raye. Plus, she has her own manga and anime too. And at number 7, we have Curious the Lightsworn Dominion. This Link 3 monster has some pretty strict summoning requirements, needing 3 different monsters with the same attribute, but different types. But if you fulfill that, you get one of the most powerful effects in the game, sending any card from your deck to the graveyard. And you get to tack on an extra mill 3 on top of that, since a card being sent from your deck to the graveyard triggers another Curious effect to mill when that happens. Curious also comes equipped with an effect to add a card from your graveyard back to your hand when it ends up in the graveyard because of your opponent, but this rarely comes up. Curious is part of a line of absurdly powerful extra deck monsters that includes Beatrice and Lavalval Chain, as technically generic extra deck monsters who can send any card from the deck to the graveyard. Foolish Burial and Foolish Burial Goods are powerful enough main deck cards in their own right, but having that kind of effect in the extra deck where you can super consistently access it transforms it from a powerful staple to a game-breaking effect that you can build your entire strategy around. Curious was the backbone of many degenerate strategies, including busted first-turn kill strategies like Danger Dark World FTK, abusing Slash Draw or Cannon Soldier to defeat your opponent before they ever take their first turn. But sometimes Curious would represent more modest, but still degenerate combos, like pairing it with Nightmare Griffin to set up game-winning floodgates and many other Link-focused combo decks. Oddly enough, it wasn't those FTKs or floodgate-abusing decks that finally got Curious banned. Tearlaments was the final straw for Curious in Kaname's eye, as the card basically guaranteed any one Tearlament graveyard effect that you wanted on top of milling 3, which usually gave you even more, popping off on different chains that helped you push through anti-tier attacks like Bestials. One card resolving often being 2 separate Tearlament plays was the last nail in the coffin for this long-time menace. Curious never really made its name in its native Lightsworn decks, but that didn't stop it from being one of the most grossly broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history across a multitude of different top-tier brews. And at number 6 on this list, we have Armageddon Knight. This card has arguably the most storied history of any Yu-Gi-Oh monster. With the simple ability to just send any dark monster from your deck to the graveyard when it's summoned, Armageddon Knight's generic utility in any deck packing dark monsters made it not just a good warrior card, but also a good generic staple across untold eras of the game. It was a powerhouse of a card in the early Synchro era thanks to setting up Synchro materials, either with tuners like Plague Spreader Zombie or high-level bodies like Destiny Hero Malicious who could summon bodies out of the graveyard, enabling powerful Synchro setups like level 6 and level 8 Synchro staples Goyle Guardian and Stardust Dragon. This formed the backbone of Teledad, a dark monster focused synergy deck that had one of the earliest cases of a tier 0 deck. The game moved away from Armageddon Knight for some years, but after that hiatus, Armageddon Knight found itself at top tables once again with aforementioned Dark Warrior combo strategies. Once again teaming up with its buddies Dark Grepher and Destiny Hero Malicious, alongside a generic mashup of danger monsters and other warrior archetypes like Phantom Knights and Goki. This resulted in diabolical combo boards, often centering on one extra deck monster like Topologic Gumblar Dragon for hand loop strategies, or more fair but still often unbeatable combos setting up Trigate Wizard, Firewall Dragon, Rusty Bardiche, and more. This would earn Armageddon Knight a many-year stay on the limited list, and even once these Dark Warrior decks were hamstrung by bans and power creep, that wasn't the end for Armageddon Knight. Right around the corner from that format was Orcus, a deck which could pull off its game-winning combo by just putting a single Orcust Harp Horror into the graveyard. And hey, what do you know? Harp Horror is a dark monster. Sounds like a job for Armageddon Knight if you ask me. The funny thing about Armageddon Knight is that it's also largely responsible for the limitation of maybe the most iconic warrior support card, Reinforcements of the Army, way back in 2009. And they repeated that relationship a decade later in 2019, dominating the game together again. Armageddon Knight is such a simple yet powerful warrior. Don't be surprised if you see it pop up in a game-defining deck again in the future. And at number 5, we have Tearlaments Reinoheart. This card is quite similar to the previously mentioned Armageddon Knight, as its primary usage is being slammed onto the board so you can send a dark monster from your deck to the grave. The big difference is that Reinoheart just so happens to be doing it in what many experts, professionals, and historians of Yu-Gi-Oh! Consider the strongest archetype ever, Tearlaments. This was a monstrous Tier 0 deck, whose impact still looms largely over the way modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is played. Why send any dark monster to the grave when you can just send a Tearlaments Havness and then trigger her effect to fuse into Tearlaments Kidkalos? You get to start a chain of degenerate combo creating plays and also enable milling that threatens to flood your graveyard with super powerful effects that either trigger when milled, like the Tearlaments spell and trap cards, or set up their own value and interactions, like say a Fairy Tale Snow or Destrudo. Or just mill something that mills you even more to keep the value train going. And that's not the only trick up Reinoheart's weird Kaleidoscope sleeve, since it does more than just send a Tearlaments monster to the graveyard. Like nearly all the Tearlament cards, Reinoheart also triggers an effect when milled, but instead of fusing like the girls, he just summons himself from the graveyard, though he will be banished if he leaves the field. The cost, if you can call it a cost, is sending a Tearlaments card from your hand to the graveyard. This doubles up your Reinoheart value, as sending basically any Tearlament card will trigger their effects. And Reinoheart summoning himself will also get you this initial on-summon effect to send a Tearlaments name. 2 potential plays off that effect, and it didn't even really cost you anything, since Reinoheart summoning itself already replaces the card you sent. Reinoheart is an amazing card, and genuinely one of the best in-archetype starters ever. The only reason it's not even further up this list is because you can't really give Reinoheart all the credit for how broken Tearlaments became, which isn't quite true about the next card on this list. And at number 4 on our list, we have SPYRAL Double Helix. This Link 2 pair of super spies turned a pile of cards that was barely playable and never considered anything but an interesting but ineffective control shell into one of Yu-Gi-Oh's most dominant decks in history. Right up there with the likes of Tearlaments and Teledad from earlier. But instead of just being a powerful playstarter and value piece in those legendary decks, Double Helix functionally created this dominant archetype overnight with its release. SPYRAL's biggest weakness was that its most powerful card, SPYRAL Master Plan, was practically impossible to summon consistently or efficiently. This absurd advantage engine immediately pluses you on summon, and pluses you 2 more times when sent to the graveyard. But that 7-star stat line kept it from being relevant. Double Helix completely solves this problem with this simple effect of special summoning any SPYRAL monster from your deck if you correctly guess the super type of the card on top of your opponent's deck, monster, spell, or trap card. Thanks to cards like SPYRAL Gear Drone, SPYRAL Tough, and SPYRAL Super Agent, this was usually known information and a guaranteed hit. And the combination of Drone and Agent easily fulfilled Double Helix's 2 SPYRAL monster summoning condition. It also kept the effects of cards like SPYRAL Quick Fix online, as its name became SPYRAL Super Agent on the field or in the graveyard to facilitate the many SPYRAL effects that rely on Super Agent to work. This would lead to Quick Fix and its lack of a hard once per turn on any of its effects constantly summoning itself from the graveyard, courtesy of Double Helix's identity theft, adding a card from deck every time, and discarding the missions that Master Plan would search. Squish this all together and you get a runaway train of value and board building potential that's closer to solving Cold Fusion than it is a card game. Not only that, but despite its tier 0 status and several hits to the deck across multiple ban lists, the deck randomly made a resurgence in the meta again 3 years later after it abused a bit of Dark Magician support, forcing Konami to completely axe the deck by banning Master Plan. Without the advantage generator to summon out of the deck, Double Helix lost the biggest oomph for its effect. But the concept of easily accessible link monsters that special summon or otherwise access cards directly from the deck is a persistent case study in broken design across many monsters in Yu-Gi-Oh's history, and you can thank Double Helix for starting that trend. And at number 3 we have Baronne de Fleur. This level 10 Synchro Superstar redefined the power level in Yu-Gi-Oh! When it came to easily available extra deck boss monsters for Synchros. With a standard boss monster attack line of 3000 and the ability to destroy one card on the field every turn, Baronne's one of the best pure board presence monsters ever. And the Omni Negate made Baronne the go-to card for every deck that was putting together a combo and needed a little extra insurance against powerful board-breaking effects. Even though Baronne could only use the Omni Negate once while it was face up on the field, the card's final effect lets you tag it out for a level 9 or lower monster in your graveyard, while Baronne goes back to the extra deck. This quite often meant that you would either get to resummon your combo starter and push for game, or even resummon the monster that lets you summon Baronne in the first place, setting up the Omni Negate all over again. It's hard to overstate just how prominent Baronne was. It was immediately impactful in a tier 1 deck with Sword Soul thanks to Longwan and its ability to make a Synchro 10, and the deck's hyper consistency in putting that out. But Baronne's prominence lasted much longer than Sword Soul, immediately slotting into innumerable Crystron Halki Fibrax combos, since that card enabled any kind of synchro spam you could imagine. Any deck with easy access to level 7 monsters like Kashtira would use her because you could just normal summon a hand trap like Ash Blossom and randomly stumble yourself into a juggernaut of a boss monster. This sort of all-around accessibility made Baronne the bane of many formats, giving many decks a quick answer to Nibiru before 5 summons in a way Baronne's closest competition, Borreload's Savage Dragon, never could. It finally took frequent appearances in another tier 0 deck, Snake Eyes, for Konami to finally give Baronne a well-earned spot on the ban list. When it comes to outstanding warriors this powerful, sometimes the real breaking point is just how accessible they are. And speaking of which, jumping in at number 2, we have SP Little Knight. Another Link 2 monster, Little Knight shares this quality of being incredibly easy to access with Baronne, but a whole magnitude less difficult, as you can basically toss out Little Knight with any 2 monsters. No tuner or star counting required like with a Synchro. Though you do not get her on summon banishing effect if you don't use an extra deck monster as one of her materials specifically. So there are some hoops to jump through. They're just way easier thanks to every deck basically churning out extra deck monsters, especially Link 1s who make Little Knight hyper efficient when it comes to investment. Though this effect does prevent you from attacking directly for the turn, that's usually more than worth it. And once Little Knight's on field, it comes equipped with one of its own form of quick effect interaction, temporarily banishing 2 face-up monsters on the field in response to an opponent's effect, so long as at least one of the targets is yours, then returning them to the field during the end phase. Not as powerful as Baronne's Omni Negate, but way easier to access and extremely tricky, since she can even choose 2 of your own monsters to dodge mass removal, or combine it with cute synergies like Branded Regain to permanently get rid of your opponent's banished monster. Baronne was seemingly ubiquitous, but no extra deck monster has ever been as prominent as Little Knight. Decks that don't even play Link monsters, who lock themselves into other summoning mechanics, will often play Little Knight just because they so frequently find themselves with some spare extra deck monsters lying around and need a bit of spot removal on later turns. Little Knight even represents 2 pieces of proactive interaction thanks to the inherent synergy with IP Masquerena, giving you the on-summon banish effect of your opponent's cards as a quick effect while still retaining her other quick effect banish ability. It would be insane to list the number of decks Little Knight starred in, because the list is basically every deck since the card was released. Little Knight is the most playable extra deck monster of all time, and downright powerful to boot, but not so oppressive once it hits the board that you instantly wrap up games either, hitting a sweet spot of greatness but minimal clamor for a banning, which is really the only thing that keeps Little Knight from taking the number 1 spot on this list, which goes to the greatest warrior monster of all time. Taking the number 1 spot on this list is not 1, but 2 ladies in Isolde, Two Tales of Noble Knights. Another entry on the Link 2 list, Isolde is one of the most clearly broken cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. Requiring 2 warrior monsters to summon, they're a bit harder to access than the last 2 entries. But don't let that fool you. Isolde more than makes up for it in power and impact. Isolde, on Link Summon, adds a warrior monster from your deck to hand, which would be a busted effect on its own, but it comes with the stipulation that you can't summon or activate its effects. You can still get some value out of this with pendulum cards like the Ignites, but that's rare. So usually this effect ensures follow-up on the next turn. The really broken effect is that Isolde can send any number of equipped spells from your deck to the graveyard to special summon a warrior whose level is equal to the number of equips sent from your deck to the field. That's right, for the cost of any number of foolish burial goods, you get to summon a likely broken warrior monster directly from your deck. Remember how SPYRAL Double Helix was busted because it did that for just SPYRAL monsters? Or how Armageddon Knight was a multi-format all-star for its effect on summon? Well, Isolde just mashes those two concepts together as a link 2 that can special summon a card like Armageddon Knight directly from the deck. Those Dark Warrior or Goki or Curious combo shells mentioned earlier, the combos often started by summoning Isolde. And while having to run a lot of equip spells in your deck might not be ideal, Isolde also abused that by dumping recurring discard fodder like Divine Sword, Phoenix Blade, or even reasonable extenders like Living Fossil. And it's not just Goki or Dark Warrior FDKs, as Isolde was core in the Noble Knight spin-off archetype Noble Knights, which has had multiple stints of meta viability. To put it plainly, Isolde is to warriors what Crystron Halqifibrax is to tuners. A broken catastrophe whenever you see the card legal. The second these two ladies hit the field, you don't know if you're getting Exodia first turn killed, getting an Acid Golem swapped to you in a Mikanko combo to lock you out of the game, or staring down a nearly impenetrable wall of negates or hand rips from Noble Knights. Isolde is not just a broken warrior monster, they enable or abuse a whole slew of other warriors and warrior-based archetypes, many of which are previous entries on this list. These reasons, among many more, obviously got Isolde a trip to the Forbidden List, where this duo resides to this day. Isolde's got all the power of the super broken auto-win warriors left on the list, but with an actual storied history of use and abuse to pair with that power level. And isn't it poetic that the best warrior monster ever is the monster that can only be made using warriors?